Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss any update from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Join the only official Telegram channel of Rouse IAS Study Circle to get the relevant materials and important updates. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of the newspaper analysis. So today we are going to discuss the Hindu Daily edition dated 26 October 2021. The news to be discussed has been displayed on your screen and the timestamping has been provided in the description box. Dear students, we have an announcement for you. We at Rouse IAS have released Mains Compass for the upcoming Mains Examination 2021 for the following subjects, namely Economic Development, Ethics, Integrity and Aptitude, and Essay. All these compass are available at our eLearn platform and our students can get access from there. Mains Compass for the remaining subjects shall be released shortly, and especially for those who wish to study from the hard copy of the Mains Compass, they can buy them from Amazon. The link for Amazon to buy the Mains Compass magazines has been provided in the description box below. So in continuation with the series of the UPSC Prelims 2021 question, today we are taking question number 32 of set A. Which one of the following ancient towns is well known for its elaborate system of water harvesting and management by building a series of dams and channelizing the water into the connected reservoirs? So the options given were Dholavira, Kalibangan, Rakhigadi and Ropar, and the answer to this question was A. Now the context of this question was also asked in the full-length test 3 of Rouse IAS, question number 44. Consider the following statements about Dholavira, whereby the fourth statement explicitly mentioned about the water conservation. It says that water conservation of Dholavira speaks volume of the ingenuity of the people who developed a system based on rainwater harvesting. Then this topic was in The Hindu News also in the context of the World Heritage List, and this was covered under the DNS of 28 July 2021, and in this session we talked about the unique features of the Dholavira, which explicitly again mentioned a cascading series of water reservoirs, which gives us a signal that Dholavira was famous for its water management system. And then again in the Focus magazine of 2021, this topic was included, and again it was explicitly mentioned that Dholavira was known for expansive water management system, as it was located in the water scarce region which developed an expansive system letting them thrive in harsh environment. So if you have gone through the full length test or the DNS or the Focus magazine of the Rouse IAS, this question was easily solvable. So moving on to our first topic, a reminder that India still trails in the hunger fight. Now this topic has appeared in The Hindu page number 8 in the context of recently released Global Hunger Index and the poor rankings which India has got. So as the context clearly states that the Global Hunger Report has once again made the headlines in India for the country's poor rankings in terms of Global Hunger Index. The report ranks India 101 out of 116 countries, with the country falling in the category of serious hunger situation. Now this topic was covered in detail in the DNS of 16th October 2021, whereby the session discussed about the Global Hunger Index, the concept of hunger, and all the indicators which are taken to measure the Global Hunger Index. So to understand the basics of the Global Hunger Index, you are advised to go to the DNS of 16th October 2021. So that is why in this session we will move towards certain other key concepts which are related to this topic and relevant from your examination point of view. So here are certain sample questions which have been asked by UPSC in previous years, which will help you to understand the relevance of this topic. In UPSC 2016 prelims, there was a direct question that which of the following are the indicators used by IFPRI to compute the Global Hunger Index report. There were 3 indicators given. The first was the undernourishment, the second was the child stunting, and the third was the child mortality. And the question asked was to select the correct answer out of these given 3 indicators. So if you have gone through the DNS of 16th October, you can easily tick the correct answer. However, in order to answer the UPSC 2017 mains question, you need to understand the basic concepts related to the hunger and food insecurity in India. So the question asked in 2017 was that the hunger and poverty are the biggest challenges for good governance in India still today. Evaluate how far the successive governments have progressed in dealing with these humongous problems. Suggest measures for improvement, and this was asked in small question that is of 150 words. Now, if you closely look at this question is interlinking multiple topics. One is hunger, second is the poverty, third is the good governance. And then it also asks you to analyze the government steps which have been taken in this direction, and then it asks for the future reforms. So to understand such type of questions, you need to be crystal clear in your mind about the basic concepts related to hunger, poverty and good governance. So that is why under this section I have taken certain basic concepts which you need to be aware of to answer such questions. So regularly in newspapers, in magazines, in your study materials, you come across this word, malnourishment. Think about it, that what basically is malnourishment. Most of the times when we read about this word, a picture comes into our mind of a child who is very weak and skinny, having very low height or low weight. However, malnourishment is not restricted to the underweight. Understand the word mal. What do you exactly mean by mal? Mal signifies certain imbalance. So that is why if it is malnourishment, it is the imbalance of nutrition. So this imbalance can be in excess or it can be deficient. That is why malnourishment has two components. First is associated with the deficiencies of the nutrients and other is associated with the excess of nutrients. Undernourishment is just one part of the malnourishment which occurs due to deficiencies of the nutrients. When a human body does not get the adequate nutrition, it gets undernourished. However, when the human body gets excess of nutrients which is required as per the height, weight or age, the result is that the body becomes overweight or in extreme sense it becomes obese. So first of all you need to understand that malnourishment has these two components. One is associated with the deficiency and the other is associated with the excess. Now this undernourishment has further four sub-classifications. One is the wasting. It is the relation of weight and height. When the weight is low as compared to the height, we say that child is wasted. The second is stunting. It is the relation of height and age. When the height is low as compared to the age, we say that the child is stunted. The third is underweight, which gives us a relation of weight and age. So when the weight is lower with respect to the age, that child is called underweight. However, there is fourth component also which we generally tend to miss. That is the micronutrient deficiency. Now first you need to understand that what is the basic difference between the macronutrients and micronutrients. Macronutrients are those nutrients which are required by body in excess. On the contrary, the micronutrients are those nutrients which are required in a small amount in body. The example of macronutrients are like proteins, carbs and fats. However, the micronutrients encompasses the vitamins and minerals. So the vitamins like A, B, D, K, etc. and the minerals like zinc, iron, copper, manganese, cobalt. So it has been witnessed that we generally tend to focus on the macronutrients in our diet. We regularly care about our protein intakes, the carbs and the fats intakes. However, we tend to neglect the requirements of vitamins and minerals in our body. So therefore, the micronutrient deficiency is a lack of vitamins and minerals that are essential for the body functions such as producing the enzymes, hormones and other substances needed for growth and development. So when there is a deficiency of all these things, we say that this is a case of undernourishment. Now we'll understand the excess part, that is the overnutrition body, the overnourishment. So there are two subcategorizations. One is the overweight and other is the obese conditions. They are differentiated on the basis of the body mass index. If the body mass index is greater than 25, we say that the person is overweight, and if the body mass index is beyond 30, we say that the body is obese. So body mass index is a simple ratio of the weight of a person measured in kilograms divided by the height of that person measured in meter to the power 2. So for example, if your weight is around 65 kilograms and your height is around 1.5 meters, you square the height and you get the value of the BMI. So if the BMI comes less than 18.5, you are underweight. If the value is between 18.5 to 24.9, you are normal. If it is between 25 to 29.9, you are overweight, and beyond 30, it is obese and extremely obese category. The next interrelated topic with this is the food insecurity, and very important from your examination point of view. Now we will understand the basic definition of the food insecurity given by Food and Agriculture Organization, that is FAO. And you need to be very clear about each and every word in this definition to understand the basic concept that what is food insecurity. Is it just related to the quantity part, or it also has to do with certain quality part? We will see. A person is a food insecure when they lack regular access to enough safe and nutritious food for a normal growth and development and an active healthy life. Now if we decode this definition into simple language, we see that there should be the component of reliability and accessibility. Then there is a component of quantity, that the food which a person is getting should be enough in quantity which is required by his or her body. And then it is also related to the quality. For example, if there is a person A and if there is a person B, both of them require, let's say, 100 calories per day. Now the person A is getting the 100 calories from just one diet, that is rice, and the person B is getting this 100 calories from multiple dietary sources like rice, milk, fruits. So the necessity of the 100 calories is fulfilled by both these persons. However, the person A faces higher threat of food insecurity because he is not getting the other nutrition which the person B is getting by virtue of having the diversified diet. So here comes a very important part. Whenever you have to think about the food security, think about it in quantitative terms as well as the qualitative terms. So the FAO measures the food insecurity using the Food Insecurity Experience Scale, that is FIES. So this scale shows us the increasing intensity of the food insecurity. For example, the stage 1 is related to the uncertainty regarding the ability to obtain food. And this, the FAO calls it as the mild level of food insecurity. On the other hand, if a person is not getting a food for a day or more, this is known as the severe food insecurity condition. So this map shows the global state of food security, and different regions perform in different manner. For example, most of the South Asia, including our country India, is in the moderately performing category, and the best performing category is this region. And here, as you can again see, that the food security has the components of affordability, availability, safety, quality, and the natural resources. So such type of maps are very handy during the mains answer writing, whereby you can use such maps to depict the regional variations in the food security across the globe, and you can draw such maps with regard to India also. So summing up the entire topic once again. In this session, we learned that what are the basics of malnourishment or malnutrition. We understood that malnutrition refers to the deficiencies or excess in nutrient intake, imbalance of essential nutrients, or impaired nutrient utilization. The double burden of malnutrition consists of both, that is the undernutrition and the overweight. The undernutrition manifests in 4 broad forms, that is wasting, stunting, underweight, and micronutrient deficiencies. This is also called as hidden hunger. Then we understood the concept of body mass index and what is the range of the values of the BMI for different levels of nutrition. Then we understood the concept of food insecurity and the global variation in the levels of food security across different regions. So moving on with our next topic, which has appeared on page number 9, a bubbles of trust approach. Now, this topic has appeared in the context of developing a new vision of the global economy by the Quad countries and balancing the technological and economic interests of Quad and China, which means that this approach has to do something between the Quad countries and China. So, this topic falls under the General Studies paper 2 under the subsection of the international relations and the micro sections of India and its neighborhood because it concerns China, and it also concerns a grouping that is by the bilateral, regional and global groupings involving India or affecting the India's interests. Now such news becomes relevant from the UPSC examination in prelims as well as mains, because in prelims every year there are certain questions which involve the regional groupings and ask about the members of those groups, or there are questions in prelims also which are related to certain terms in news. For example, here we have a term bubbles of trust approach. And to reassert this claim, here are two sample questions which have been taken from the UPSC 2016. The first question says that which of the following country is not a member of the Gulf Cooperation Council among the given following members. So the answer to this question is Iran. And the second is related to the terms which are there in the newspapers. For example, the question asked that the Belt and Road Initiative is sometimes mentioned in the news in the context of the affairs of. So as you know, that answer to this is China. Now this topic is a brief analytical topic because here we have to understand a specific approach in relation to the changing international order with respect to the Quad and China dynamics. So let us understand this approach with the help of a map. Suppose this is our rough world map. Now presently we know that there are two approaches in order to understand the international relations. The first is the outward looking approach and the second is the inward looking approach. In the outward looking approach, there is a free flow of everything. The free flow of goods, services, ideas and people. And the inward looking approach is basically dependent upon the protectionist policies. In modern era, the emerging concept of regionalism is the outshoot of inward looking policy according to some experts. Now with our basic understanding, we know that United States is a torch bearer of the outward looking policy. And on the contrary, China is the torch bearer of inward looking policy. So there is a fundamental difference between how the USA operates and how China operates. Nevertheless, it is fact that both the countries have certain overlapping modes of operation, but here we are restricting to the general modes of operations. And from the current experiences, we are also aware that both US as well as China have achieved considerable success despite having different approaches to the world economy. Now if we take the Quad grouping, which comprise of 4 countries, that is India, USA, Australia and Japan, is a sort of regional policy which lies in between the outward and inward looking policy. However, as we discussed that primarily regionalism is associated with the inward looking policy, because according to this, the region is separating itself in terms of certain trade rules and regulations from the world. And this has been done because the popular backlash against China is pushing the Quad governments towards policies of self-reliance. However, as we know that it also in turn poses a challenge of inward-looking policies which can contribute to the geopolitical marginalization. Now the present situation is that USA still rules the global economy. However, the dynamics are changing very fast, but still it is a dominant player in the global economy. But when it comes to the technology and especially the information technology, it is expected that now China is dominating. So what is exactly the bubbles of trust approach? So what exactly is the bubbles trust approach and how is it relevant in this fast changing international dynamics? Now, as we know that many of the regional blocs face several difficult negotiations during the trade deal. India coming out of RCEP is the best example to this. Because each and every country has its own socio-economic status and their developmental aspirations. So generally the few rules do not satisfy the diversified needs of multiple countries, and that is why the negotiations become very difficult. And now if we compare China with the Quad countries, we understand the fundamental differences in the economic setup of China and Quad. For example, all the countries which are the members of the Quad have liberal democratic economic setup, whereby in China the economic setup is mainly authoritarian. So obviously any negotiation between these two parts of the world will be futile in near terms because of different socio-economic conditions. Here comes the role of Bubbles Trust approach. Bubbles Trust approach is basically a middle path which tend to expand organically and attract new players. So what happens is that the Bubbles Trust approach are not like the regional groupings which are insular in nature. They are not insular. So let us understand this with this example. Suppose we have one group having countries A, B, C and D, and the other group is having the countries E and F. And presently the situation is that both these groups differ in their ideology, in their economic setup as well as political setup. So at present time, any negotiations between these two groups will fail. And the regional or the insular approach will push the countries A, B, C and D to form one group and remain aloof from the other group. But the Bubbles Trust approach provides a different way. This approach will ask these countries to presently form a group and wait for a right time so that some interest might overlap between these two groups, and then they expand organically, taking certain areas of E and F, for example, technological areas. It might happen that with time, both these groups might share common technological goals, and on the same time they might not share the common political goals. So the Bubbles Trust approach will say that A, B, C and D should for the time being collaborate with the E and F in the technological aspect. And that is how it will continuously attract the new players and expand organically. So this is the fundamental concept of the Bubbles Trust approach, which differs from the regional groupings which tend to be insular. So the relevance of this approach in the present dynamics of international relation is that this allows for the cooperation of the Quad countries and China in technological sphere, especially the information industries, as both are equally placed and can be mutually beneficial, avoiding the long and complex negotiations typical of trade agreements. So that is why many experts of the international relations have called for the Bubbles Trust approach to govern the dynamics of the Quad and China. But still there is a word of caution also, because even in the IT sphere there are some fundamental differences between how the China works and how the countries of the Quad works. There are fundamental differences between authoritarian and liberal democratic approaches to the information age. The Quad cannot allow the differences of approach on privacy, data governance and digital economy to widen. So from the examination point of view, you should be aware about all the members of the Quad and what are the fundamental issues between the Quad-China dynamics. In this topic, we have learned about the new terminology, that is Bubbles Trust approach, and how this can be a way ahead to resolve certain issues of China and the Quad members. So moving on to our next topic, which has appeared on page number 2. The heading of the topic reads that EDMC, that stands for East Delhi Municipal Corporation, EDMC for biomining of legacy waste at Ghazipur. So though the news is regional in nature, however, there are some important concepts in this topic. One is related to the biomining and other is related to the legacy waste. So the context of this topic is that with an aim to speed up the process of clearing the Ghazipur landfill site, East Delhi Municipal Corporation on Monday passed a proposal to implement the biomining of 50 lakh tons of legacy waste. So an important term, that is biomining, has surfaced in this news item. If we go by the UPSC syllabus, this topic falls under the General Studies paper 3 of Technology and Environment part, with the micro section focused on conservation, environment pollution and degradation. So again, this topic is an interlinking topic of technology and environment, and therefore it becomes very relevant from the UPSC examination point of view, as this can be also seen from the question asked in UPSC 2017 prelims. The question read, in the context of solving the pollution problems, what is or are the advantages of the bioremediation technique? So as we can see, a direct concept based question is asked in prelims examination. So the statements given in this question is, it is a technique for cleaning up the pollution by enhancing the same biodegradation process that occurs in nature. The second is, any contaminant with heavy metals such as cadmium and lead can be readily and completely, these words are important, readily and completely treated by bioremediation using microorganisms. And the third statement reads, genetic engineering can be used to create microorganisms specifically designed for bioremediation. You have to find the correct statements out of these three. Among these three statements, the second statement is incorrect and the first and the third statements are correct, and hence the answer is C, that is 1 and 3 only. So in this section, we will understand the key concepts of the legacy waste and the biomining. As the headline of the news article mentions this word legacy waste, the first question arises is that what exactly are the legacy waste? So legacy waste basically are the long kept wastes that have been collected and kept for years at some barren land or a place dedicated for landfill. So the point is that legacy waste are very old waste. However, this old nature of waste makes them more dangerous because first is they occupy large spaces and make the land unproductive. It is estimated that in India more than 10,000 hectares of land is logged under the dump sites. Second is, because these wastes are there in place for many years, they become the breeding ground for pathogens and flies, which in turn lead to diseases like malaria, chikungunya, dengue, etc. Further, they also lead to water pollution because they contaminate the groundwater in that area, and finally they contribute to the generation of greenhouse gases, and sometimes they also pose risk of uncontrollable fire. So you must have heard about the Swachh Bharat mission, which was launched in 2014. So from 2014 onwards, the Swachh Bharat mission had been emphasizing on reclamation of landfill sites to adhere to the Solid Waste Management Rules 2016 and the guidelines of the National Green Tribunal, with an aim to recover over an estimated 10,000 hectares of urban land that is locked in these dump sites in India. So in regard to this, we will understand three key concepts. The first is the biomining, the second is the bioremediation, and the third is the biodegradation. So the process of biomining includes microorganisms or the microbes which are used to extract the metals of economic interest from the rock ores or mine waste. Therefore, the name is bio, that is related to the microbes, and mining, that is to extract the metals. The metals extracted from bioleaching includes gold, silver, uranium, nickel, copper, cobalt, and zinc. And in recent days, biomining techniques have become very handy to clean up the sites that have been polluted with metals. So the conclusion is that the biomining is the use of microorganisms for mining purposes. Now comes the bioremediation. Bioremediation employs the use of living organisms like microbes and bacteria in removal of contaminants, pollutants, and toxins from soil, water, and other environments. Further, this technique is also being used to clean up the oil spills or contaminated groundwater. So the difference is that under the biomining, microorganisms were used for mining activities, whereas in bioremediation, the microorganisms are used to remove the contaminants and pollutants. And the third important word is the biodegradation. In biomining and bioremediation, the microorganisms could be introduced by humans. However, the biodegradation is the natural process of decomposition. So these are basically an artificial process and biodegradation is a natural process. Now biomining gives us multiple advantages. First is that it allows the segregation of the complex waste, because as we have learned that biomining extracts the metal from the ores and hence they can also segregate the metal waste from the combined waste. Once they have segregated the metals, they can be used for recycling purposes also, which in turn increases the financial value. Further, it also helps in reclamation of land and it is also a cost effective solution because it does not require any large engineering structures to be built, as is the case with land capping processes. A very famous example which shows the utility of the biomining in reclamation of land is the Ajit Singh Nagar dump site in Andhra Pradesh. These both the pictures show the site before the biomining and land reclamation and after the process. And as you can clearly see that the site which was earlier a pure unproductive dump site has been changed into a green land. So under this topic we have read about certain key concepts. That first was the legacy waste, that is the waste which has been collected over a particular place for years and these are more dangerous compared to the fresh waste. The second, we learned about the potential of the microorganisms in mining activities, and under the bioremediation we learned that these microorganisms can be used to remove the contaminants and pollutants. Then we also learned that how biomining and bioremediation are fundamentally different from the process of biodegradation. And finally we learned that what advantages biomining offers to humanity with a perfect case study of Ajit Nagar dump site near Andhra Pradesh. So moving on to our next topic, which is from history but has appeared in today's newspaper in the archive section. And the topic talks about the Tilak Memorial Swaraj Fund. So as we discussed, that the context of this topic is that archives highlight an extraction from the Young India in which Mahatma Gandhi has written about the collection and administration of the Tilak Memorial Swaraj Fund to achieve Swaraj in India. And as we have discussed in the beginning, that the latest trends in UPSC is that they are asking the questions from the history which were there in the current affairs also. For the reference, we took the question of the Dholavira in the beginning, and that is why today we have taken this topic which has appeared in today's newspaper. So we'll discuss the quick key facts regarding this Tilak Memorial Swaraj Fund. The first fact is that it was announced by Mahatma Gandhi during the non-cooperation movement. So you have to memorize it, that it was announced by Mahatma Gandhi during NCM and it was announced as a homage to Bal Gangadhar Tilak on his first death anniversary. The aim of the fund was collecting rupees 1 crore by June 30, 1921 to aid India's freedom struggle and resistance to the British rule. However, the interesting fact is that the maximum contribution to this fund came from the Bombay province. And that is why the Gandhi referred to the city as Bombay the Beautiful. Now this is another important fact. The purpose of the fund was not to be spent in the foreign or other propaganda, but it was largely in spinning, weaving and other educational activity, including educating the children and ameliorate the poor conditions of the suppressed classes. So basically this fund was aimed at constructive programs, an important component of Gandhian ideology during the freedom struggle. And the last is that the Congress Working Committee allotted each province to retain 75% of the collection for their provincial expenditure. So just revising these quick facts, this fund was announced by Mahatma Gandhi during the non-cooperation movement and it was announced as a homage to Bal Gangadhar Tilak on his first death anniversary. The aim was to collect the rupees 1 crore by June 30, 1921 and the maximum contribution for this fund came from the Bombay province, and that is why Gandhi referred Bombay as Bombay the Beautiful. The purpose of the fund was for the constructive programs, not for the propaganda, and the CWC allotted each province to retain 75% of the collection for provincial expenditure. Now taking up the reference, on page number 11, an interview of UK's High Commissioner to India has been posted. It talks about the significance of the Indo-Pacific in the future of international relations. It says that Indo-Pacific will become the center of the world. Moreover, last week British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said India was essential in ensuring the free, open, inclusive and prosperous Indo-Pacific. And you are also aware about the recent initiatives which are going on in the Indo-Pacific region. There have been multiple regional groupings from economic to military groupings like RCEP, Quad, AUKUS, etc. So this whole topic has been covered in detail in DNS of 22nd September 2021, whereby AUKUS and Quad are dealt in detail. So to understand the significance of the Indo-Pacific region, please refer to the DNS of 22nd September 2021. So now is the time for question of the day. The question asked in yesterday's DNS was, consider the following statements. Statement 1. India is among the top 5 e-waste producing countries in the world with estimated annual production of 2 million tons. And statement 2 was, e-waste contains several precious metals, rare earth metals, ferrous and non-ferrous metals, plastic, wood and glass. So you have to find the correct statements, and if you have understood the DNS, you can easily take the answer as C. So question of the day for today is regarding the Tilak Memorial Swaraj Fund, and you have to find the correct statements out of the 3 given statements. Statement 1 says the fund was constituted by Mahatma Gandhi as a tribute to Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Statement 2 says the fund was to be used to achieve Swaraj by investing in activities of spinning, weaving and education for children. And statement 3 says that the fund was constituted during the civil disobedience movement.